Happy Valentine's Month. I hope you had an amazing Valentine's Day over the weekend. Now, I am a lover of everything love, romantic love. I love to watch movies about love. But I noticed coming into this year and leading to Valentine or the month of February, I really wanted to focus on self-love, self-leadership, loving myself enough to be able to show up for myself the way I show up for others. And you understand why I'm saying this when we get into the episode. Now, when it comes to saying yes to your calling to start a business, a lot of people think fear is what the main issue is or the real struggle is. But what if fear isn't the real issue? What if the fact that you are described as dependable, reliable, oh, she's always there for me, he's always there for me. What if underneath that is something deeper that is stopping you from saying yes to your calling? Well, in today's episode, I will reveal the real reason you haven't said yes to your calling yet. And like I said, fear is not at the root of that reason. If you're excited to know what it is, tune out the road noise, lean in, and let's get started. You're currently working a 9-to-5, but you know you're called to do more. You feel unfulfilled at a 9-to-5 job you've clearly outgrown. You ignore the quiet nudge and your internal GPS prompting you to move in a new direction because you're afraid of losing the stability of a paycheck and stepping into something uncertain. If that resonates with you, you're in the right place. Welcome to Start That Business Podcast, a faith-based business podcast for Christians working a 9-to-5 who feel called to more. Here you will find the clarity, strategy, systems, and faith-led guidance you need to step boldly into your God-given calling to start a service-based business. My name is Chichi Okomadu. I'm a business strategist, an implementation coach, and a Jesus follower. I knew I was called to start a business, but I struggled with lack of clarity, self-doubt, and the fear of losing a stable income. My lack of courage kept me stuck in my 9-to-5 until I traded it for faith and obedience to God's calling. I left my job, built a 7-figure service-based business, and ran it for 13 years. Now I help other Christians working a 9-to-5 do the same. Your next assignment starts here with someone who has lived the journey, navigated the transitions, endured the pressure, reading the ups and downs, and stayed anchored in faith through it all. You don't have to stay stuck in unfulfillment, fear, doubt, or lack of clarity because God has already equipped you to launch the business He placed in your heart. It's time to partner with God and step boldly into your calling to start that business. You know the one I'm talking about? Yes, that one you've been putting off for a long time. February is the time of the month where a lot of people focused on loving others. So if you are in a romantic relationship, if you are in maybe a friendship, February is the love month. Everyone is exchanging gifts, saying I love you, and doing all the things. Even this morning when I was walking into the grocery store to pick up a few items, I saw about 3 guys walking out of the grocery store holding flowers. And I was saying to myself, Valentine was about 4 days ago and people are still purchasing flowers and gifts for their loved one. But I had a conversation with myself a couple of weeks ago, and I was frustrated at the fact that I show up for others. People describe me as reliable, dependable. She's always there. But I was frustrated at myself, and I was asking myself the question, why is it that you show up for everybody else? You bend over backward and you go above and beyond for other people. And when it comes to your own goals, when it comes to the things God has called you to do, you make excuses, you negotiate, And I started looking inward, asking myself, do I really love myself? Because there's a lot of focus on outward love, especially this month. But what about if you paid attention to loving yourself more? Self-love. I call it self-leadership love, where you make a decision to love and lead yourself in a way that honors and brings transformation for yourself. Now, like I said before, I am incredibly reliable. I am the kind of friend that you are assigned to do stuff and you can go and sleep and know that Chichi is going to get it done. People describe me as reliable. If you need me, I'm there. If there's a deadline, I will hit it. If someone asks for my help, I show up, even when it's not convenient, even when I would rather be doing something else. And people describe me as consistent, dependable, always there. But I had to confront myself because I don't always show up for myself with the same energy, with the same excitement, with the same momentum that I used to show up for other people. When it comes to my goals, when it comes to my business ideas, when it comes to the things God has nudged me to build, I will always negotiate. I will always delay. I will make excuses. I will give myself so many reasons why I shouldn't do that thing. And I started asking myself the hard question, why is it so easy for me to show up for others? And it's so hard for me to show up for what God is calling me to build. It's so hard for me to show up for the goals that I set for myself. It's so hard for me to show up for the person that I decided that I want to become in this new year. If you are like me, you are a high-performing professional working your 9-to-5 job. You feel called to start this business God is calling you to start. But like me, you keep delaying. You keep making excuses. You keep negotiating. You set a time to work on it. And when that time comes, you negotiate and you end up not doing what you said you would do. If you are like me, you're not alone. You're not alone in that struggle. Now, the real reason you struggle to say yes to your calling, to start a business, or to say yes to yourself or to the goals you've set for yourself, the real reason is not that you lack time. It's not that your job is in the way. It's not that your schedule is so full. It's not that you have so many responsibilities. The real reason is what I call identity insecurity that is triggered by exposure. I know that sounds like a mouthful, but stay with me. I'm going somewhere with that. I noticed that you are comfortable showing up where your identity feels safe. And that was what I noticed for myself because I asked myself that question and I started thinking and digging deep. And I realized that I am comfortable showing up where my identity feels safe. So safety looks like showing up for others. I am needed. I am wanted. So I feel safe in that space. But the calling God is nudging me to, or the goals that I've set for myself, they require me to show up where my identity feels exposed, where my identity feels visible, where I'm challenged to do things that I will normally not want to do for myself. And when I'm challenged in those areas, my vulnerabilities become visible, my weaknesses become visible, my failures become visible. So as a result, I hide or I stay away from things that trigger my insecurity, especially when it comes to being exposed or being visible. And when you answer the call to start your business, it increases your visibility. All of a sudden, You are responsible for the services you're offering to your clients or your customers. You're responsible for the team that you build. You're responsible for the growth of that business. So many things now become your responsibility just by saying, yes, I'm going to start a business. All of a sudden, you are now visible. And whatever insecurity is still unresolved within you, it gets triggered as a result of that exposure, as a result of that visibility. So that's the reason why you have not said yes yet. Saying yes triggers this insecurity in your identity because it opens you up to being exposed and visible to the world. And now you see why a lot of people can mistake that for fear, because fear is like on top of it, because once that insecurity in your identity is triggered, now you're afraid to do stuff. You're afraid to start that business. You're afraid to really go at your goals, because the more you go at it, the more it exposes your weakness, the more it exposes your knowledge gaps, the more it exposes the things you still need to learn, the more it exposes that you are not the most intelligent person in the room, because now you have a team of people who are equally intelligent or even more intelligent in areas where you struggle. So this is the real reason why you haven't said yes to your calling. Your identity insecurity is being triggered by the thought of being exposed or visible when you say yes to starting your business. Now, let's go beneath the surface. Let's go a little bit deeper. What is behind this identity insecurity that is being triggered by exposure? The number one root cause of this is your identity is tied to being needed. Yes. Like I said, at work, you're needed. In your family, you're needed. At your church, you're needed. And when you're needed, you feel valuable, which is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. But when you think about starting your business, it shifts from you being needed to you being visible. So you see where the trigger comes? Because in every other area of your life, you are needed and you feel valuable. But when the shift happens from going from an employee to an entrepreneur, it shifts from you being needed to you being visible. So visibility feels riskier than being helpful. Being visible, being responsible for this business, feels like a very risky thing to do than being helpful. So that's where the identity insecurity is triggered. So you shrink back because visibility can be judged. When you're visible, you can be judged. When you're visible, when you fail, your failure is magnified. When you're visible, it exposes your vulnerabilities, it exposes your fears, it exposes your weaknesses, it exposes your knowledge gaps, like I already said. And sometimes we stay dependable, we stay reliable because it protects us from exposure. It protects that insecurity we feel when we are exposed or visible to the world. So that is the first root cause that is powering this insecurity. Now, the second root cause that powers this insecurity or this reason why you haven't said yes yet is fear. Like I said, fear is at the top. The bottom of it is this identity insecurity that is triggered by exposure. Fear of exposure is the second thing. Starting your business means you might fail publicly. You might launch and nobody responds to you. You might talk about your offer and nobody signs up to work with you. You might not look as competent as you do at work because you're starting this new thing in an area where you do not have experience in. It's different from your corporate career that you've built for 13 years, for 15 years. You are an expert or master in your career, but when you switch over to starting a business, you feel like Haman. Haman was a soldier in the Bible that had fought so many battles. So in his professional career, he was an expert. But in his health, he was failing. He felt exposed in the area of his health. So that's the way it feels when you're starting a business. You're exposing yourself and in an area where you are not so competent in yet, because now you're learning the ropes of what it means to be an entrepreneur. So it's easier to stay excellent where you're already proven. It's easier to stay excellent at your 9 to 5. Your 9 to 5 gives you structure. Your 9 to 5 gives you years where you have built your expertise. But your calling requires initiative. Your calling requires learning from scratch. And initiative feels vulnerable. Learning from scratch feels vulnerable. Learning from scratch means you are embracing the fact that there are some things you do not know, and that exposure or visibility amplifies your vulnerability. And that's why you shrink back, because you're not ready to face that exposure or that visibility. And this is why so many capable, responsible Christians who are working a 9 to 5, but they know they have been called to start a business, this is why they stay stuck. Not because they lack discipline, but because they lack clarity on what to do next. When you don't have a clear path, resistance takes over. Fear of visibility takes over. Identity insecurity that is triggered by exposure takes over. But clarity reduces that fear. Clarity empowers you. When you know the next step, it becomes easier to say yes. And that's exactly why I created the Start That Business Life workshop. In this life workshop, you will learn how to start your first service-based business with limited time, zero guesswork, and without quitting your job. It's happening on March 21st, 2026 at 12 noon Central Standard Time. If you know God has been nudging you to start, but you keep saying, not yet, maybe next time, maybe next year, this workshop will give you the structure you need to finally move forward. Go to fromjobtobusiness.com to save your seat. And if you can't attend live, maybe you have another event on that day. The replay will be available for a limited time, but you have to register to get it. Another root cause of identity insecurity that is triggered by exposure is misunderstood self-love. Everybody's talking about love, love, love. Love is in the air in this month of February. But let's talk about loving yourself for a second. Now, in Mark 12:31, it says, love your neighbor as yourself. A lot of us quote this first half all the time. We say, oh, love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. But what does it mean to love yourself? When we go back to scripture, what does it mean to love yourself? Biblically, loving yourself, it's not ego. Loving yourself is not indulgence. Loving yourself is stewardship. You cannot fully love your neighbor if you constantly neglect what God has put inside of you. So that means you can't properly love your neighbor. You can't properly love other people if you have not learned to love yourself first. And loving yourself first means stewarding what God has placed in your heart, stewarding what God is calling you to build and not neglecting it. Sometimes what we call loving other people is actually avoiding loving ourselves enough to show up for ourselves the way we show up for other people. And sometimes what we call busyness is actually fear of exposure, fear of visibility. So we pour ourselves into serving others because we are trying to avoid serving ourselves. We are trying to avoid doing what God is calling us to do. Think about the parable of the talents for a second in Matthew 25. The master gave the 3 servants talents, and he said, go do business with it until I come. Now, the 3rd servant, he didn't lose the talent. What did he do? He took the talent, he buried it into the ground. Why? He was afraid, triggered his insecurity, because it meant that he was going to be exposed. And sometimes this identity insecurity that is triggered by exposure, it doesn't look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like being responsible. Sometimes it looks like serving other people. Sometimes it looks like being busy. Sometimes it looks like, oh, I will do it later, or negotiating time that you're supposed to spend working on your goals, working on what God has called you to do, negotiating it away, making excuses, delaying it. That is what it looks like. But Galatians 6 says, each person must carry their own load. There is a part of your calling that no one else can carry for you. No matter how much you show up for your family, your friends, your church, your job, there's a part of your calling that no one else can handle except you. You cannot outsource that part to someone else. So the longer you delay saying yes, the more you normalize not loving yourself. The more you normalize starving yourself of self-leadership love. I know it's hard to hear, but it was freeing. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Once I saw that the reason why I kept shrinking back was this identity insecurity that was triggered by exposure, I made the decision to love myself by leading myself and stewarding the things God is calling me to do for myself and for His kingdom. Here's something I realized, and I wrote this down. Personal success or transformation doesn't come from showing up for others. It comes from showing up for yourself. So if you have a goal to lose 20 pounds, you're not going to lose that 20 pounds by showing up for other people. You're going to lose that 20 pounds by showing up for yourself in the gym, taking up the weights, doing the workouts, leading yourself, giving yourself what I call self-leadership love. You show up for your boss, you show up for your company, you show up for your family, you show up for your church. What will it look like if you showed up for the assignment God gave you? The real reason you struggle to say yes isn't that you're incapable. It's because saying yes requires courage. Saying yes requires giving yourself love. Saying yes requires visibility and exposure. It requires self-leadership when no one else is watching. And your future business will not be built on how dependable or reliable or how much you show up for others. It will be built on how consistently you show up for yourself and do that which God is calling you to do. If you're ready to stop delaying and finally move with clarity, join me on March 21st for the Start That Business Life workshop. I will show you how to start your first service-based business with limited time, zero guesswork, and without quitting your job. Go to fromjobtobusiness.com to register. The replay will be available for a limited time, but only if you sign up. I want you to consider showing yourself self-leadership love today. I know the whole world has been celebrating loving other people, but I want you to shift. Focus on loving yourself. Focus on loving yourself enough and loving your calling enough to say yes. Say yes to visibility. Say yes to the exposure that comes from stepping up and saying, God, I'm going to partner with you. Let's start that business. And don't let the identity insecurity hold you back, but let your identity be secured to who God says you are and how much He loves you. He says He will never leave you nor forsake you, so you are not alone. So release that identity insecurity that is being triggered by exposure and visibility and step boldly with courage to say yes to yourself and say yes to what God is calling you to do, because underneath you is the everlasting arms and you cannot fail. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I pray it made you feel seen, taught you something new, and encouraged you to take action. If it did, please please hit the follow button so you're notified when a new episode drops. If today's episode resonated with you and you're ready to start your business while working your 9-to-5, head to fromjobtobusiness.com to book your discovery call. Lastly, it will be a huge blessing if you left a review for this podcast on Apple Podcasts. It's the number one way I know this podcast is serving you. Until next time, remember, your expertise is needed, your calling is real, and I'm here to help you make it a reality.